Thank you everyone for coming to the presentation on DAP reforms and the significant development pathway. My name is Elise Saraceni. I am the Director of Reform Delivery, and today I'll be talking you through some of those changes. So in today's session, we'll have a bit of a look at the background and the overview of the reforms, then we'll have a look at the DAP reforms, and then the significant development pathway framework and the other changes to the Planning and Development Act which will support those changes. So a bit of background to this legislative reform. The WA Government's Action Plan for Planning Reform was released in 2019, and there are two initiatives which relate to this specific reform initiative. They are C7, Development Assessment Processes are streamlined and outcomes focused, and C8, DAP processes are more consistent and transparent. There were some initial reforms to the DAP system undertaken in 2020. That was when we reduced the number of panels from 9 to 5 and reduced the pool of members, as well as made some changes to the reporting templates and made the request for further information more transparent by making them publicly available. In 2023, it was a couple of months ago actually, the National Planning Reform Blueprint was released by National Cabinet, and it was adopted by all state governments and territories. This National Planning Reform Blueprint includes 10 key points, primarily relating to housing supply targets, streamlining of approvals pathways, improving building quality, improving community consultation, and adequately resourcing built environment professionals, including planners in local government. So the idea behind this National Planning Reform Blueprint is to recognise the role that planning reform can play in helping with the housing crisis. It's not a panacea or a silver bullet, but it certainly can help. So the Amendment Bill 2023 was introduced into Parliament on October 18. It has now gone through the Legislative Assembly and will be debated in the Legislative Council in the coming weeks. The bill includes 12 parts and 4 key components. It includes significant development pathway and DAP reforms, local government roles and responsibilities and decision making on development applications for single houses, reform of the WAPC, and some other minor reforms which help streamline existing processes and will support those other 3 reforms. Now, the bill is supported by various supporting regulations, regulation amendments, and guidance documents, which you see on the screen now. There are 4 sets of regulations and 1 applicant's guide for the significant development pathway. The reason that a couple of those documents are highlighted in red is because that is what we are seeking feedback on. The Draft Planning and Development Local Planning Scheme Amendment Regulations number 2 has closed for consultation, as has the Draft Significant Development Pathway Applicants Guide, but the Draft Planning and Development Local Planning Scheme Amendment Regulations number 3 will be open for consultation until the 31st of January next year. The reason that we're not seeking feedback on some of those other documents is because of the fact that they have already been consulted on extensively in one way or another. So looking at the changes to the DAP system, what you see on the screen there is largely what was consulted on in March 2022. That is reducing the panels to 3, appointing fixed-term full-time members, removing mandatory thresholds and making the system opt-in for any development that is not excluded over $2 million, RARs being submitted by the administration and not council, and there's no changes to the timeframes. The changes from what was consulted on largely relate to allowing multiple and group dwellings of any size above $2 million to be able to opt in to the DAP system, and allowing any community housing proponent, regardless of its value or size, to opt in to the DAP system. What you see on the screen there is the Metro Outer DAP and the Regional DAP. So the Metro Outer DAP is largely aligned with the 2 outer sub-regional frameworks, and the Regional DAP is the rest of the state outside Metro Perth and Peel. And the Metro Inner DAP is what you see on the Metro Outer DAP map there, but in the yellow, and that is broadly aligned with the central sub-regional framework. We have also made some changes to the exclusions. So development on a region, scheme, reserve or public work will no longer need to go to the DAP system. They can go straight to the Commission. And development by a local government, except for where it is for a commercial purpose, is also excluded from the DAP system. There will be a new position established to oversee the governance and administration of the DAPs. This position will be responsible for, as it says on the screen there, everything to do with the governance and administration, including being responsible for oversight of the fixed term members. That person will not sit on a DAP in a decision-making capacity, but they may be responsible for representing the DAP at the State Administrative Tribunal. The majority of changes through the DAP system are not through the Planning and Development Amendment Bill themselves. They are actually through regulations which are proceeding alongside of this. There are some minor tweaks to the regulations which were advertised in March 2022. Those changes are not significant, but we're expecting to make them available for stakeholders as soon as practicable. So moving on to the significant development pathway, this is happening in lieu of the Special Matters DAP. And for the applications that you see on screen, there is the option for them to go through this pathway and have the Commission as the determining authority. So that criteria is largely aligned with what you see with the Part 17, except expanding the $20 million criteria to be applicable to Perth and Peel region scheme areas as opposed to just Perth, and being $5 million elsewhere. There is also the ability for the Premier, on recommendation of the Minister, to authorise an application to enter into this pathway if the application is considered to raise issues of state or regional importance. Applications that are not eligible for this pathway are those that are in improvement schemes or planning control areas, public works, any applications in a redevelopment area, applications in the Swan and Canning Rivers development control areas, and any government agreements. It is anticipated that the pathway will come into commencement in early 2024, but that date is yet to be confirmed. The Act, in terms of the significant development pathway, provides the broad governance framework and key provisions relating to the pathway, including decision-making and discretionary provisions, and that will be through a new Part 11B. There are processes outlined in supporting documents, and they are the significant development regulations, which include the eligibility criteria themselves, and the significant development pathway applicants guide. So they are the two complementary documents. In terms of the decision making, the Act will establish the Commission as the decision maker and also allow the Commission to vary the local planning framework if the variation to the scheme is minor and consistent with state planning policies, a region scheme and the local planning strategy. If the local planning scheme is not up to date, so hasn't been reviewed in accordance with legislation, that is currently 5 years, but is proposed to be changed to 10 through this bill, and the proposal is of state or regional importance, and the WAPC considers its determination is in the public interest. There is some further guidance which will be developed in order to help the Commission make those decisions and provide some clarity about what is in the public interest and what is a matter of state or regional importance. Orderly and proper planning and the preservation of the local area's amenity remain key considerations in the decision making on this, and the Commission will be bound by all other laws, including conflict resolution mechanisms, which will be in place to deal with any other conflicting approvals. So looking at the procedural and oversight requirements that are in the Act, so the Act provides a regulation making ability, and the regulations can specify the eligibility, application manner and form, and required documents and information, the procedures for dealing with applications, and the time frame. The procedural provisions of the applicable planning instrument, which in most cases will be the LPS regulations and the applicable local planning scheme, are not binding on the Commission, but they can be applied where appropriate. Compliance may be undertaken by the WAPC or the local government. And there is also the ability to appeal to the State Administrative Tribunal, and that includes something a little bit extra, which is a call-in ability for the Minister after a hearing. The Governor may cancel or amend an approval, similar to Part 17, and the fees for the pathway will be prescribed by an order. Looking at the significant development regulations, which were just mentioned on the previous slide, the key provisions of those are conformance. There is up to 7 days for acceptance of the application. And there is pre-lodgement consultation with the Commission, which is mandatory. There are options and scalable options which are detailed in the applicant's guide. There is the scalable design review process. This may be required pre-lodgement and or during assessment, and there is further detail on that in the guide. And there is requirements for consultation, so applications must be referred to the local government, they must be publicly advertised, and consultation must be undertaken with other agencies, and these applications will have the ability to use the State Referral Coordination Unit. In terms of requests for further information, the Commission may request further information, if the applicant agrees, so it is up to the applicant to agree to that request, the clock is stopped until that additional information is received. If the applicant does not agree, the application is to be determined as submitted. These are very similar to the provisions which are in the deemed provisions, and most of the procedural requirements in these regulations have been largely modelled on the deemed provisions. The time frames, so the determination is within 120 days after acceptance, unless it's otherwise agreed by both the Commission and the applicant, and the excluded holiday periods, as defined by the LPS regulations, are also included in the time frames. There is the ability to seek amendments to previous approvals. However, any amendments to previous approvals from this pathway need to be sought through the pathway. You can't go through the DAP or the local government. If you wish to do so, you will need to submit a new application. There is also the ability to waive consultation and referral requirements for amendments to approvals. Looking at the applicant's guide, that goes into a little bit of further detail than what the regulations themselves do. That includes pre-lodgement options and processes, including timeframes. There is a 14, 42 and 60-day option. It is up to the applicant to choose which of those options they would like to use. There is some further detail on design review, so it outlines the scale and the circumstances when required, and that will be complemented by the detail that is to come out of the review of the State Design Review Panel. There is information on what to submit with an application and local government and agency consultation timeframes. So it's 60 days for the local government, and there is a staged input for agencies to accommodate the workings of the State Referral Coordination Unit. There is also public consultation detail and timeframes available. So that's 28 days community consultation, exactly the same requirements as the local planning scheme regulations for complex applications, and some guidance on how to satisfy conditions, which will be added to over time. There are other changes to support the significant development pathway. They include conflict resolution provisions. These provisions have been consolidated into one section, a new Part 11C, and will apply to both Part 11B applications and Part 17 applications, as well as other WAPC development applications, such as those in improvement scheme areas. These require certain more focused functions which conflict with the planning approval to be referred to the Minister for Planning. At the moment, the functions only relate to anything to do with traffic, transport and access, so that's generally any main roads approvals. There is the ability for regulations to be made to expand those functions as more data becomes available and more issues are identified. So there is that regulation making ability to include those additional functions in the future if required. The powers of entry and inspection have also been updated. This is a new Part 10 of the bill. And planning review requirements will be included in a new Part A. So that is promoting the maintenance of both the state and local planning frameworks and changing the review timeframes from 5 to 10 years. In regards to the review of the local planning framework and a scheme review, this change from 5 to 10 years means that your review will need to be complete within 10 years, not that you start the review in the 10-year time at year 10. So if you have a lot of things that you need to do as part of your review, you'll need to start that review process a lot earlier. If there's not a lot to do, it can likely happen a lot later in the piece. There will be further guidance on that and some further changes to the local planning scheme regulations to support this legislative change, and those will be advertised in accordance with legislative requirements. So there'll be further detail made available on that later. So the next steps, we'll be considering any feedback received on the Significant Development Pathway Applicants Guide and anything that anyone may say about the regulations. Then we will finalise the regulations, procedures and guide ready for implementation in early 2024. If you have any further questions, please contact us at planningreform@dplh.wa.gov.au. Thank you.